Good evening. I'm Major Charles Nance. Tonight I'll be presenting the operational approach to the developing crisis in the CENTCOM AOR. We'll start off by setting the operational environment. Iran continues to be the primary malign actor in the theater, continuing to attempt to project power to continue advancing its national political, religious, economic, and military hegemonic goals in the region. It currently views the CCASG as weak and fractured based on its intra and inter-relationships with its partner nations, as well as the US and Western alliances that it previously relied on. Conflict over the last year, specifically focused around space and ballistic missile development, above ground nuclear weapons tests, as well as territorial and resource conflicts between UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait with Iran over gas fields, as well as the islands of Abu Musa and the Greater and Lesser Toom Islands, and most notably, conflict over Iran seizing a Saudi Arabian oil tanker and its crew under the narrative that they were protecting them from pirates. The current threats in the region, Iran has threatened to close or impact freedom of navigation through the Straits of Hormuz through surface and subsurface mining, continued advancement and demonstration of its nuclear weapons program, continued facilitation and support for its proxy forces, identified or unidentified. Of note, Hezbollah, Iranian-aligned militia groups, and the Houthi tribe down in Yemen, as well as continued activity and escalatory activity by the Global Islamic Caliphate, the violent extremist organization. The Joint Planning Team has developed 5 lines of effort to move us from the current crisis state to the higher headquarters strategic guidance end state for the region, identifying de-escalation and freedom of navigation for the Straits of Hormuz, a strengthening, reinforcement, and increased integration of the CCASG, the medium to long-term goal of de-escalating nuclear weapons proliferation in the region, and then identifying enabling objectives, lines of effort associated with the territorial and resources disputes to create, and then creating opportunities to counter violent extremist organizations in the region. The first 2 lines of effort are designed in consistency with U.S. CENTCOM escalate to de-escalate policy. It'll be the forward deployment of air, sea, and ground-based offensive and defensive capabilities in the form of a carrier strike group, F-22 Raptor, F-35 Lightning, Patriot, and THAAD ballistic missile defense systems. These will be to prompt the return of the Saudi Arabian tanker and crews and facilitate increased integration as well as increased demonstration by the CCASG nations of their solidarity and capability to counter Iranian efforts. Further escalation can also be facilitated through contingency bomber task force deployments into and through the region, as well as the buying the opportunity and time for U.S. CENTCOM to further develop flexible response and deterrence operations as this situation changes. Those 2 lines of efforts facilitate setting the environment for the third line of effort, engaging the international community, as well as to set the conditions for Iran to de-escalate the continuing nuclear weapons proliferation inside the theater. This allows the opportunity for Iran to de-escalate its posture and open the door for UN regulation, as well as the US to engage with Saudi Arabia to address the potential procurement of nuclear weapons from Pakistan, eventually culminating in a US facilitated, UN led Arabian Peninsular nuclear deterrence policy in the future. The 4th and 5th lines of effort are designed to increase the stability as well as open the door for even further increased international engagement. U.S. CENTCOM will facilitate a whole-of-government approach to returning the territorial and resource disputes, as well as reprioritizing, re-emphasizing them within the United Nations, allowing a return to the status quo, if you will. Additionally, these elements of resources and territory can be used as leverage to facilitate the achievement of the final end state from higher headquarters, as well as continuing and improving relations throughout the region to facilitate the eventual end state of a potential joint combined U.S. Western allies and CCASG counter VEO task force, continuing to address violent extremist organizations in the region, as well as developing terrorist threats. I apologize for the spaghetti chart, but this is just to illustrate the fact that these lines of effort are designed to be holistic and pressure the regime on all of their critical capabilities in order to affect change to achieve our end state. With one exception, these are not designed to engage Iran on their religious or ideological CC, because that could be viewed by the regime as an attempt by the US or Western allies to institute regime change, which would force the Iranians to immediately react and go into major theater combat operations, putting the entire region at risk. Pending your questions, this concludes the operational approach briefing.